We're here today with Crystal,
Hey guys.
one of your favorite yums, and we have one of my personal favorite yums, Noelle of Vidable, with us today. She is
Hi.
a LCSW. I never remember what that stands for, so I'm going to let her say that again. What does
So that's
LCSW stand for?
that's a licensed clinical social worker.
Okay, got it. I'm still going to forget that, but yes, I remember the social worker part. And so when this pandemic first broke out, you were one of the first people I thought of. First of all, the fact that you're an essential worker, I'm thinking of everyone who's an essential worker right now and can't be with their families like we are, though it may seem like torture at times. It still is a blessing in certain ways. But secondly, you're out there on the front lines continuing to fight for kids who may even be more impacted by this pandemic and not having the shelter and comfort of school on a daily basis. So I'm just, curious, and I'm sure everyone else is, like, how is this virus impacting families from what you see?
Well, I think it impacts everybody, on different levels. It was such a shock to so many families. That's the first thing. We got the call Sunday night. So I work with children age 0 to 5 in Head Start programs and early learn programs in Brooklyn. So we were told we usually go by the DOE schedule for stuff like this, for closures. And we provide what's commonly known as daycare, but it's a lot more than that. It's early education, it's UPKs and things like that. So when we found out Sunday night, we immediately convened on Monday morning to talk about needs. So in our program, we have a lot of working parents. We provide breakfast, lunch, and dinner in our centers. We know everything about our kids. So when we weren't able to say goodbye and we weren't able to figure all of this out, and have at least a conversation with the parents about what the next steps were, it was definitely challenging, and but we got right to it to figure out what it is that we need to do immediately. And what was most important. So what we decided is that we needed to remain, my role with the kids as a social worker is to do observations, to help if there's any needs that are not being met, to make sure that we are, if they're, we ask questionnaires when a child comes in. Do they have any domestic violence situations in the home? Do they have any need for food? Do they have a need for literacy inside the home? Are the parents both literate? Are there things that they maybe financially would need? The common core of our livelihood: food, clothing, and shelter. So we know those key basic things that perhaps they need individually. So we try to help them with that in a community level. So when we were cut off in 24 hours, it felt like a blow to the system that we care for these kids every day. So our immediate response was, how do we create outreach? What do we do to do that? So everybody's been working together today we did a bunch of send home packets in East New York. We filled a bunch of educational information and a bunch of information about the virus. We sent them in packages. We called the parents and we asked for them to come to pick them up at various different centers. And a lot of parents came one at a time by appointment, and they came and they picked up these packets for their children. And then we asked them how they were doing, if they needed something, obviously, with social distancing in mind, because that's something we all have to be aware of. And we felt great today that we were able to do that. We've been doing that for the past couple of days. So that feels great, because at least they're being receptive, and they know that we're there for them. And that's the most important thing, me personally and the people I work with, is to make sure that people know that, we may not physically be there, but we will always be there to support our families, always, no matter what. So that's what we've been trying to do.
That's comforting. So you had mentioned something that, you guys are handing out like packets and information about, like, basically breaking down the virus to the kids and families. So to that effect, I feel like we're all still kind of struggling over here to really explain this, especially when you have younger kids. It's like, I mean, my son, who's 9, he's not even that small, is still like not quite understanding why he's home and not in school. Although in the beginning he was like celebrating that. Now he's like, when am I going to see my classmates? And why can't I go to the park and play basketball? So how do you recommend we explain this to kids?
I think each kid is different. I mean, I have a 6-year-old at home, a first grader, and you know, he's still kind of in that happy mode that he's home and he doesn't have to put his uniform on because he wears a uniform, and he doesn't have any tests this week. You know, he's not dealing with tests. You know, he's dealing with the homeschooling. But a lot of other people that I speak to, the kids really do miss one another. So I think you have to go where your kid is at, right? You have to be calm about it. I try not to let them listen to the news. You know, try not to have that on in the background because it's not helpful for a child. They're not able to process that kind of stuff. It's good for us to be informed, but I think the large discussion is scary. So I think that they process it in a different way. And I think that this is a very teachable moment, not only for us as parents, but to how to correctly parent in a crisis situation. And I think too, is that some of us also have our own internal traumas, I think, and I think they come up when things like this happen. And I think it's important for us to be very aware of that inside of us and to address it right away and to kind of say, okay, I know I'm feeling this way because when I am isolated, I feel like this. When I'm stuck in a house, I feel like this. You know, it could be a lot of how we process rather than how they process. So I think just like compartmentalizing what that is and figuring out, is it my issue or is my child actually feeling this? You know, I think diverting those two things and then having an open dialogue with our kids. Like, how do you feel about this? Are you okay? Like, we don't know when this is going to stop, but we're doing the best that we can, and we are safe here at home, and we're lucky to be here. And, you know, we're doing the best that I can. We have to wash our hands. We have to use cleaning products. We have to make sure that we use good hygiene, and then always make something into a teachable moment for our kids, you know, because they're the ones learning from example from us. So that's how I would address it. Just calmly turn that TV off. I don't suggest that at all because it just gets frightening, you know?
For sure. I know, Crystal, you have a question kind of about breaking things down for older kids and the disappointment. I kind of think this is kind of a good segue to that if you want to ask it.
So all the children right now, and teens as well, right, that were anticipating to go to prom and graduation, like this is a time where it's like, all right, how do we help them with that, you know, disappointment? And us as parents, we were excited. Like my 8th grader was supposed to graduate, right? And I'm supposed to be going to her graduation. So there's no prom now. So what will we do where we're not imposing our feelings, but then of course validating that, you know, it's okay for them to be mad, but try to, you know?
Yeah, of course. And I think that just giving them that support and letting them know that we will get through this. We've gone through other things that we've been disappointed in life. I also think that a lot of people are not, they're calling it not a no to those things. They're calling it a postponement.
Got it.
So I think, you know, I think that a lot of places, and I think as our role as parents can be, is to see what we can do to postpone that for our child. Can a group of parents get together and say, okay, it may not be this June, but maybe we can have it in July. You know, who's to say that it has to be in June? Who's to say that? Perhaps, you know, you could use some creative forces if you're able to do that. Work with the school and the faculty to see if it can be postponed. And if it can't be postponed, I think people are going to start to use a very creative way to do things that they've never done before. And I think that us as parents can make a creative little graduation for them. I know my son had his first virtual play date recently with his little buddies. And I think that using our creativity and being able to say, okay, well, maybe it's not the way we thought it was going to be, but where there's a way around it, when there's a will, there's a way. It's teaching our children too that no matter what, all this is a teachable moment for kids, all of it, no matter what age they are. And teaching them there may be a roadblock here, but if we turn around or we fix the street, we could go forward. So it's just teaching our kids that even though there's a pause, it's not an ending. So I think that's the way we could teach them, to just take a step back and we can learn from it.
That's a great point. Now, I want to add, I know, Mary, you have a question about adults when it comes to domestic violence, but since we're talking about kids, Noelle, what do you think is happening right now for those kids who are probably going through child abuse and are in the system, and now their parents have to homeschool, or maybe some that are in foster care? Are there agencies out there who are regulating, who are checking on these children who had limited resources before?
Yes. So foster care agencies are now under the guideline of an essential worker. So I've spoken to a couple of different people that are currently in direct care in the field. Child welfare is a whole different sort of a thing. We don't know what the next day is going to bring every day. So that aspect of the job is now just intensified. You know, I do worry significantly about children who are considered vulnerable, that perhaps school would have been a safe haven for them. So indirectly, when the mayor gives a certain, directive and he talks, and even with the schools, he's saying, look, if you do need help, the schools are going to be open. There are people at the schools currently that are taking shifts that could answer questions. They have food available for people, because what creates this type of situation? Financial stresses, right? DV and things like that, frustrations, finance problems, not being able to have food. All of those things are combined right now. So these frontline workers are dealing with keeping themselves safe, right? Physically, and also then trying to be in the field. And I think as a community, we also need to take care of one another. If we live in an apartment complex and we know of a mom who's really struggling, and we know that, and we know that this neighbor of ours is really having a hard time, they're a single parent, if you say, hey, you okay? If you have a relationship with that person, you okay? Is there something I can do to help you? Do you have food? I cannot tell you how many times within this week that has happened personally with me, where I've gotten a text, Noelle, I don't have diapers, Noelle, I don't have food, Noelle, I don't have, and these are people I've known for years. So just making, asking that question and being a little bit more human ourselves and saying, hey, do you need something? Can I help you? Is there something that you don't have that I could give you, that perhaps I have, And I think that that's an important thing too. And that's a good example for our own children, is to show them, that kind of kindness. So I feel for the frontline workers right now. I think that they are monitoring. They are out there. They are doing their job. During holidays and things like that, particularly long spans away from, hold on. Please.
It's okay.
Can you hear me? Oh,
yes.
Geez, I'm sorry, just interrupted. During long spans in the holidays, it definitely happens where we, long spans occur in, Thanksgiving, Christmas, where we do see an increase in child welfare cases. So this is something that some of us are trained to know what this forecast looks like inside of child welfare. So I hope the best for them, and I hope that they're trained well. So let's see. Hopefully people know where to get their resources. People have been trying to put it on. I know New York One is a great place for those resources, and also they're communicating through like class dojos through the schools.
I have that for my kids.
Dojo. There's also Parent Square is another one that's being used by the little ones. And you could call your school. There are lunches at the schools. And then there is a list, Mary, that I could give you guys if you'd like, of all the schools on Staten Island, particularly, that have food available and ready for the kids if they need to pick it up.
I'm also curious about custody, like people who don't really get along, like couples who are now separated, dealing with shared custody of their children. Who keeps the baby during, this virus or during this lockdown, going to different homes. We're supposed to stay home. So any experience, or have you run across that?
I haven't come across it yet, but I mean, it's the first week, but I'm sure it's going to come up. I mean, if you were arguing before the virus, I'm sure you're going to be arguing.
It's worse, right?
It may get worse, and you never know, it may get better, but I'd like to, just think realistically. And I think that if it was a problem before, it could be, again, another teachable moment of how to kind of do the best that you can with that person if they're a difficult person. If you have an order of protection out, make sure you abide by that order of protection. That doesn't change because this is all happening right now. Orders of protection stay the same. They're a law-abiding. Court is only, from what I understand, court is only in session on emergency basis right now. They're not actually having hearings. This is what I was told, that court is kind of at a bit of a halt. They're having emergency. So I know a lot of lawyers that are working from home, but the people who especially work on cases like this, DV cases, that work for law guardians and stuff like that, I mean, they're not stopping what they're doing. I mean, they want to make sure that their clients are safe as well. I know particularly I had a discussion with one last week, and they are just as concerned about the safety of their client. And they want to make sure they are okay. So luckily, everybody I've ever worked for, nothing stops them from the safety of a child. So, I have full confidence.
That's definitely refreshing to hear.
Yeah.
So I know that you and your husband are both essential workers. What's that experience like? I mean, I know we were talking before, and you do have like the assistance of your mother-in-law. Thank goodness for her. She's a saint.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about the experience that you guys are having to go out into this and leaving your families.
Yeah. Well, luckily, for me, I work for myself. I own my own company, so I'm able to go, but in and out of kind of like how I do the work that I do, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to go and do it, right? Just because this is going on. It's, I'm not going to be able to go in every single day, and I don't go in every day because my children now are being homeschooled, right? So that's a different thing that has never happened before. Usually when I go to work, I drop my son off in the morning, right? Everything's changed. I go to do my job, and then I come back and I pick up my son. So, or my dad picks up my son, or, but that's all kind of changed. And I have a 2-year-old at home as well. So, Mondays and Fridays, I don't work. So I'm home with them Mondays and Fridays. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I'm trying to work just in the morning. And then I'm doing a lot of work from home to try to get, do it the best that I can with the situation, and do other work that perhaps I wasn't doing before, which, paperwork, things like that. But my husband is an essential worker and has to be there every single day. He works for a shipping company, and those supplies have to go out. So, right now we're worried about his health and safety because he's doing a lot of work right now, and we want to make sure he's safe. And we're just trying best practices right now, right? Him wearing gloves, him wearing a mask, him with the Lysol. I mean, we have so many cans of Lysol. I told him it's his new cologne. It's my new perfume. I mean, I put it under my arms. I put it everywhere. It's all over the place. We take our shoes off at the door. I mean, he doesn't come in the house with his clothes on anymore, for the poor neighbors. But, we make sure that he's as safe as possible, but it's a tough, he's very, it's very stressful. It's very, very stressful because the stuff that he's shipping is life-saving. Right. So, he's got to get this stuff out. It's literally a matter of life and death. So he's got a pretty heavy load on him, no pun intended. So, my mother-in-law is extremely supportive, and we live together, which is extremely helpful. So I have an advantage. I really do. So my dad, unfortunately, he's quarantined right now in his house, so he hasn't really been able to see his grandsons. So that's really hard too, you know, because our normal everyday life is completely, it's upside down, but we're trying to keep it as, you know, level as we can. We had this experience though the first time at Sandy, when Hurricane Sandy happened.
How so? How was it?
Well, my husband was working for the same place, and he was an essential worker at the time as well. So when people couldn't really leave the island and everything, what was happening, the bridges, everything was just a disaster. He had to go back and forth and bring supplies, because that's what his job is. So, you know, tractor trailers and things like that. And at the time where I was working frontline at the time, and making sure that our kids were safe. I actually was running a 24-bed unit of juvenile delinquents at the time of Sandy, and all of the locks on the doors were electronic, and we had no power.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, so we had a lot of AWOL. We had a lot of you know, situations going on. It was so, you know, we were in a high stress situation then. So with that it feels very similar to that, because everything kind of was standstill. Remember, there was no power for Sandy for a lot of people. You know, we had no power. We had no, you know, Highland Boulevard where we live was completely demolished, basically. There was so much loss of life. So it feels very similar to what that looked like, you know.
If no one has thanked you so far, I just want to thank you for everything you do. Our interview's nowhere over, but I'm just saying thank you, because right now, sacrificing the time with your family, and you're telling us about Sandy, it's a lot of stress on you as a family, and I just thank you for all that.
Yeah,
oh yeah,
seriously.
of course. I mean, I love what I do, so that, you know, you got to love what you do. That's number one. And I love what I do.
In that same vein, right, how is this affecting adoptions and like foster homes? And like when you mentioned the facilities of like juvenile delinquents, it kind of made me think of that. Like how are they probably, you know, coping or having to maneuver with now everything being sort of frozen?
You know, there's a lot of people that are waiting, you know, to be adopted. Adoption is a tough thing. It takes long enough as it is. Right. And I'm sure this is prolonging it, but I got to tell you, everybody that I work with in the field that I work with are exceptional people, and they go above and beyond. So without a doubt in my mind, the social workers that I've worked with and do work with are people that really are for the kids and their permanency and their safety and well-being. So I have a great amount of faith that they are doing everything that they can to make sure that the kids are safe, and whatever they're pushing and they're trying to get stuff done, and they were trying to get stuff done last week and the week before in anticipation of perhaps something like this happening. But I have great faith in the social workers that I know, and I know they're doing great things.
That's really, you know, heartwarming to hear, because I think everyone's mind kind of goes to like the kids, and being in limbo, it's pretty awful. But so, I mean, we don't want to take up too much of your time, and we know that you got to get back in with your kids. So I'm going to leave you with this last question. What are your major concerns as a social worker right now? And how can parents help alleviate those concerns? Because we're all in this together. I know we say that a lot and it sounds corny, but it's really the truth. So
I think like all things, I think we have to like open ourselves to see if people like need help. Like, I think that you have to be open to that, listening to that conversation from another person, and being able to say like, you know, I want to be there for you, and asking for help as well if you need it. Like last night, my husband, I wanted him to wear gloves at work, and he was being, you know, I don't need it. I'm fine. I don't need, you know, I'm fine. I said, look, you gotta, you gotta put them on. I mean, you come on. Like, he's dealing with a lot of stuff and a lot of people. I said, I want you to put gloves on. I don't need it. I don't need it. So then he goes, all right, do you have any? I said, I don't have any. So I put on Facebook, hey, anybody have gloves, right? And we spoke to a neighbor of ours. My mother-in-law was on the phone with one of our neighbors. He's an 82-year-old man. And he said to my mother, he overheard the conversation. He said to my mother-in-law, oh, well, I have gloves because my neighbor, I have a really great relationship with him and his wife, and they're in their 80s. And I've called them probably 10 times since this happened. Do you need anything? Do you need any supplies? Do you need any food? Do you need this? We're very, very close. My children are very close to them. They were at their baptisms, our wedding, you know, so these are people that are very close to us. And so we've asked them, do you need something? Is there something we can do? And when he found out about the gloves, he walked across the street and he put the gloves in our door of our house. So my husband had gloves for today. And then once people saw that on Facebook, a bunch of other people dropped gloves off in our mailbox, you know, for my husband. So I think it's if you do need something, it's important for you to be able to tell people I need something. You know, it's good to have that conversation. And then if you have elderly people in your neighborhood that you do know, or maybe you don't know them, just ask them, you know, hey, is there something that you need? Knock on the door. Do you need something? Was there something that you weren't able to get? Are you okay? Are you fed? You know, I know a lot of places are delivering, which is great, but maybe provide the delivery schedule to some people in your neighborhood. Do a printout of that, and put them in mailboxes for people. This supermarket is delivering, this supermarket, this is the hours that the elderly and disabled, there is a list of the elderly and disabled hours in supermarkets. Did you guys know about that? It's like early morning shopping hours.
Yeah, for senior citizens. Yeah, I saw
So
that.
then maybe make a printout of that. I mean, I don't, some people I know don't have Facebook. You know, we see everything all day. Maybe make a printout of that and put it in people's mailboxes in your neighborhood. Everybody just do a little bit, and then it becomes a lot of it, right? So just, if you have to kind of start at the base of where you are in your community and reach out to people and make sure they're all right. I mean, nothing feels better than doing something for another person, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, nothing. So just keep yourself in that mode of taking care of other people.
Well, thank you. Those are some great words to just live by in general, I think. And can I just tell you, you dropped a whole bunch of Noelisms in this. Like, a little bit becomes a lot of it. I'm gonna have to like use that. So
a little bit, yeah, a little bit becomes a lot of it. I got a lot of those. I got to be honest with you.
You do, because we're gonna probably go back and highlight them for when we actually post this. So, well, anyway, thank you so much for talking to us and for all of your wisdom and insight. And I'm sure if anyone out there has questions for you, please send them to us at Young Urban Moms. You want to drop your social handle if you want, people could reach out to you.
Yeah, they could, you know, my name's Noelle Vitable. You put, you know, if you want to put that on your information, if they need anything. I'm also a psychotherapist. So if anybody is really feeling stressed out, they could call me at any time. And I've been doing a lot of that phone stuff recently with people. It's my first podcast, so that's nice. So anything to help another person is what I care about.